I'm very happy to have two colleagues who are going to speak to us about Qusayr Amra in Jordan, which was a site on the 2008 World Monuments Watch. And for people who don't know us well, the World Monuments Watch was started in 1996, and it's been a wonderful forum for many of us on the staff to learn about places that we had never heard of before. And so we learn about them in great detail, but also the challenges that local advocates and professionals face in caring for the sites. And Qusayr Amra is such a site that is actually a very, very important site, but not always well known to people outside of the region. And Gaetano Palumbo, who runs our programs in the Middle East, and Giovanna de Palma from the Istituto Superiore per Conservazione e Restauro are going to speak to us tonight about the work that started a number of years ago. And like many conservation projects in which World Monuments Fund is involved, no project is ever simply a straightforward conservation activity. There's always a wealth of people that come together, from historians to archaeologists to conservators, and in this case, also students from Hashemite University. And also, you'll see in their talk that the project also gets into other aspects of what happens in a region. So the site is not an island unto itself. It's part of an environment. And so conservation projects that we're involved in often are part of a much larger dialogue in that community. So with that very brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Gaetano to tell us about this wonderful site, and Giovanna will be joining him to talk in more detail about the conservation and archaeology of the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, and it's my great pleasure to present this project to you tonight. We're going to embark on not only on time travel, but also we are going to discover, and you will be among the first to see some paintings and some details of this monument that have not been seen for 1,300 years, and you'll see what I mean in a few minutes. Jordan, in the Middle East, it's a small country, however endowed with a huge number of archaeological and historic sites. Our project, done with the Getty Conservation Institute and the creation and the Department of Antiquities of Jordan, on the creation of a large database system, which is now available online, the Mega Jordan Project, lists almost 11,000 archaeological sites in the kingdom. 4 of these are World Heritage Sites, and one of these 4 is our Qusayr Amra. Qusayr Amra, located approximately 80 kilometers to the east of the capital Amman. The so-called desert castles are a number of structures which are all except castles. They are estates, they are palaces, they are caravanserai, they are baths and fortresses belonging mostly to the Umayyad period, which is the first true dynasty after the conquest, the Islamic conquest of Jordan, which happened around in 632. The dynasty is established around 660 AD, and it only lasts for about 90 years. In 750, in fact, the Umayyads are defeated by their rivals, the Abbasids, which establish a new dynasty. The Umayyads had their capital in Damascus, and they used the area of Jordan mostly for their several activities, including a relationship with the local Bedouin tribes. So for this reason, many of these estates are established in the desert of Jordan, and Qusayr Amra is one of these. Qusayr Amra is a small, what you see today of Qusayr Amra is basically the bathhouse of the site, but it's actually a very large estate. A large estate that includes a lot of structures, including waterworks and a mosque, a Qasr, which is a small ruin here, which probably was the real castle of the site, and a number of other structures, many of which never properly investigated. Here, is the parking and visitor center, and here is the actual site that you visit. So the context is one of a pretty much deserted area, isolated. The closest village is only about 30 kilometers away, 20 miles away. Within the bed of a wadi system, a small valley that carries water in winter, only in episodes of the rare rains that you get in the region. However, this is enough to have trees growing in this valley, and these trees are probably also the reason why this site is there. Some of these trees are very ancient. They are terebinth trees, wild pistachio trees. Being in a wadi, the site was subjected to floods in several episodes of flooding, and so in the 90s, a barrier was established to avoid further damage from these flash floods episodes. A very quick slide just to point a few dates. So the site was built between 723 and 743, and these dates we discovered, and I'll tell you why in a little while. It was abandoned after the defeats of the Umayyads in 750. We don't have evidence of use after after 750, except for sporadic use by the Bedouins as a shelter. It was visited by Arab travelers. We know that from inscriptions and from graffiti from the 14th and 16th century. And the first Europeans that saw it was Ulrich Setzen in 1806 and Burckhardt. Burckhardt is the discoverer of Petra in 1812. However, these are just footnotes in their books. They never really probably stopped or explored properly. The first really that visited the site was Alois Musil, a Czech priest and explorer that stopped there in 1898. And returned there twice to document the site. The second time with a painter, an Austrian painter, Adolf Milisch. The first conservation, however, doesn't happen until 1960, and the major conservation project is carried out by a Spanish team between 1971 and 1979. In 1985, the site is inscribed on the World Heritage List. And a documentation project is carried out by a French team with Jordanian colleagues in the late 80s and early 90s. And 2008, as Lisa mentioned, the site is inscribed on our watch list and getting some financial support from donors and from the Italian government. And 2010 is the actual beginning of the project. So, very quick description of the structure, which is a small bathhouse, basically, in the classical tradition, with a main entrance with a very large hall, a so-called throne room here, two small alcove rooms with beautiful mosaics, pavement still pretty much intact, and a small bathhouse here with the so-called changing room or apoditerium, and two rooms over suspensure, which are basically, columns upon which a floor was established. One is a tepid room or tepidarium, and the other one is a hot room or caldarium. Outside, we have an open room, which was the place where the furnace was for sending hot air and hot water into the building. Outside, we have a 30-meter deep well, which was extracting water into a cistern, which is this one. Cistern is pretty much high in order to give pressure to the water, so to cross the small distance between the well area and the building proper. So the site today, it's visited by approximately 100,000 tourists every year. So not a huge number compared to Petra, which receives more than 1 million. The characteristic of this site is the fact that it's entirely painted inside, 450 square meters of mural paintings, which is a unique case in this kind of early monuments, early Islamic monuments in the Middle East. Many of the paintings are human figures, which then will contradict some of our understanding of Islamic art as not representing human figures. However, this is a very private monument. It's not a religious monument, so human figures cannot be represented in religious monuments. Here we are talking about a private, very private place for a prince or a caliph. So from a very high end of the society, so they could also go away with some of these forbidding things. Some of the representations are very interesting. For example, there is one of the vault of the building has this representation of arts and crafts, almost a cartoon story of how to extract the stone from a quarry and taking it to the work site, or working fixtures and preparing windows, for example, for the building, and so on and so forth. Basically a story of how the building was built. Interestingly, there is also one of the earliest representation of the zodiac and constellations on a non-flat surface. This is basically, and there are almost coordinates, and it's a clear representation of a sky in this area, so very precise representation of constellations. There are also some allegoric figures, like this bear playing a lute, almost a grotesque type of representation that recalls more Roman art than late antique art. Representation of naked women in a bath. Again, not an erotic scene, really. There is a child, for example, being held by this woman. So it's more like scenes of daily life, almost. This is the largest of the paintings inside the building. The west wall is entirely covered with this very complex representation in 3 registers. We have the top register has a hunting scene with wild asses or onagers being chased by dogs and people on horseback. Other people are flag and flame bearers. They are scaring the animals into an area where they're going to be killed, some kind of a death room there. The second register is very complex, has a scene here with representation of 6 kings paying their respect to the prince. The central scene has a topless woman on the edge of a pool being observed by some people around under architectural decorations, and a scene of gymnasts or some kind of outdoor activities and players here. Finally, the third register is a false marble. As you see here already, however, you can see the state of conservation is quite poor. A lot of graffiti, some of them quite ancient, but some unfortunately modern. This yellow color is due to the conservation done by the Spanish in the 70s, which applied generous layers of shellac on top of the paintings for protection purposes. But unfortunately, that also caused some damage to the paintings. So we have, in some time of the year, especially in springtime, a lot of tourists that make the site quite unpleasant to visit. Unfortunately, I mentioned the modern graffiti, but also looting in the peripheral archaeological sites around the site. Problem of erosion, problem of losses on the outside of the monument, still a lot of grime and soot from the fires that were lit there by the Bedouins in the past. Water leaks from the various openings of the building. And improper treatment by the application of chemicals and improper treatment of the lacunae in the building. So a range of problems that brought the Department of Antiquities of Jordan to contact us for assistance, at least to evaluate the damage and to advise on conservation treatment. Because of the intervention of generous donors from our side and from the Italian government, we were able to establish a full-scale conservation project. Before doing that, however, we started with a comprehensive collection of early documentation about the site. And we contacted a number of institutions all around the world holding early documentation about this site. So as you see from the range, we went from the Americas to Europe to Australia, collecting all kinds of documentation about the site. And I have to say that all of these organizations responded quickly and with enthusiasm to our request for assistance. All of them provided their information for free to the project. So the archival research brought us some very interesting material from the early explorer from 1898 into the early 20th century. So we have also images from Gertrude Bell, who was a British explorer and spy for the British Empire. And she has provided us some of interesting photographs from Creswell, famous historian of early Islamic art, and so on. This early phase of documentation also included some high-tech interventions, such as orthophotographic plans, so that we could reconstruct geometrically the form of the site. So in order to carry out our conservation in the most appropriate way. Raking light photography, ultraviolet, infrared, which are also providing all kind of information to the site. Thermal analysis as well was very useful because we could identify this way problems in the walls by also mapping the actual position of the ashlars under the paint layers by using these thermal cameras. We also performed laser scanning of the site, which has produced digital 3D models that are going to be also useful not only for the conservation project itself, but also for presentation purposes later in the process. Also, we assisted the Department of Antiquities to re-establish the boundaries of the site for World Heritage purposes, since this was a site inscribed in the early phases of World Heritage listing when such requests were not mandatory, but now it is, so we have done that as well. Graphic documentation in order to observe and map the condition of the site before the actual intervention. We also conducted a large archaeological survey around the site in order to identify all locations of every single monument that is present around the site. And as a matter of fact, we discovered right there a very large building, larger in fact than Qusayr Amra itself, which we think is related to the construction of the site, basically the workshops where all the different activities were happening related to the construction of the site. For example, one of these sites is the location of the ancient quarries, which were never identified before, and which correspond exactly to the scenes that I was describing before, with every single part of the process of extracting the stone by splitting. For example, this is clearly a place where a block has been extracted, splitting, dressing the stone in a very rough block on site, transporting it by camelback to the work site, and then by hand and dressing it on the stone itself, on the wall itself. UNESCO is also participating with a small grant. They are going to provide the conservation of the 2 mosaic floors in the 2 rooms. So just very quickly, this is the condition of the site, of the exterior, of the extrados of the vaults before our intervention, and this is during and after the intervention. So putting a layer of compatible lime mortar on the exterior, some kind of sacrificial layers that is applied very carefully. We also changed the broken glass covers of these portholes with blown glass from Murano, Italy, which is a very appropriate use for this very beautiful monument. And this is just an idea of the conservation of the site. So this is the before and after. So now the site is waterproof. We have changed all the fixtures so that there is no ingress of water any longer. And we could proceed with the conservation of the inside, the most important part. And Giovanna is going to take over. Premi questo per andare avanti, questo per andare avanti.
Okay. So I beg your pardon for my worst English. I will try to explain. So before starting the conservation work on the site, we have to make a general assessment of the conservation condition. So we made a complete new analysis campaign in order to verify the constituent materials of the paintings, the products related to the previous intervention of restoration, and also the technique of execution of the paintings, because the technique is very important for the conservation process. A fresco technique, when the pigments, the colors has been applied on a still drying mortar, gives a more resistant result. So a fresco paintings is more resistant than a dry paintings. So the result of this analysis was that in this case they used a mixed technique with the first layer of painting in a fresco technique, and then very many phases in a dry technique that we unfortunately we haven't more, because they were destroyed by the time and by the previous intervention. So we decided to conserve this wall, that is the south wall of the west aisle, because there are present almost all the problems. Detachment, shellac, this superimposed layer of shellac on all the paintings. Then there are also bird droppings, carbonatic concretion, and so on. Engravings, scratches, filling of the gaps made by the Spanish team with the cotton soaked with the vinylic resin. Almost all the type of deterioration that we have in the monument. You have just seen the ultraviolet light photography, and in yellow we can appreciate the presence of the shellac all over the paintings. Then in this light blue are organic materials related to the bird dropping. In deep brown, there are the repaintings of the Spanish team, and also the filling of the gaps with the cotton and vinylic resin. And this is the spectrum of the shellac that we found on the paintings. It was also very important to study for the execution technique, the mortar. The masonry, the ashlar of the masonry are very irregular. So we have in some cases 2 layers of mortar. The first one and the second for regularize the unevenness of the mortar. And in this mortar, there is a proteinaceous binder, and it is probably casein, milk, maybe milk of camel. And it can cause an alteration in a greenish layer, in a greenish presence that we found on the paintings. Also very important is this stratigraphic section, and you can appreciate the mortar, then the various layers of paintings, and you can see that are almost always pigments with lead content. So this kind of pigments can have an alteration very common also in Giotto paintings, also in Cimabue paintings, and the white and also the white lead, the arsenic white, and also the minium, that is a lead red, turns into black or gray. So it's a very strong alteration, and you can appreciate this alteration in all the skin of the characters that are not pink now, but gray or black. One of the problems was were the detachment of the painting from the wall, the supporting wall. So we did mortar consolidation with using a lime without salt, without content of salt, a hydraulic mortar. And also the cleaning, to establish the methodology for cleaning was a very long process, because the shellac, when it was old aged, it's very difficult to remove. And without the aid of very dangerous substances, not only strong for the paintings, but only very dangerous for the people, for the person, for the operators. So, and there was also another need to avoid the use of a large quantity of water, because the ashlar, the stone of the masonry, is very rich in salt, mainly in sodium chloride, the real salt. So using water, we forced the salt to come in surface. We used as a final result a mixture of alcohols like isopropylic alcohol, like benzylic alcohol, with the help of some new products that are gels that helps the alcohol to work without penetrating into the paintings, and also to use a longer time of exposure. So it works in a very good manner. But in any case, the cleaning is very long, very slow, very meticulous, because the paintings are very damaged. So the good result, you can see the good result. Oh, this is the central part of the scene with this character, this figure lying on a couch, on a sofa, And this is the face of this figure before the cleaning. And some scholars interpreted it or her like a woman. And this is the result after the cleaning. So it's a man with a beard. And it has to be the Walid himself, as we can see. This is another detail completely transformed by the Spanish team that covered this detail with the net, and after the cleaning we can see that is a flabellum held by this woman standing with the peacock feather. Also in the lunette near the window there was a dramatic change because before the cleaning those are two allegoric female figures. After the cleaning they became two male figures, probably prophets, because we found also two new inscriptions. One is Iota Omicron, and the other is more probably Jonas, the prophet Jonah, known in the biblical text, but very famous also in the Quran. And those are the parallels for the character of Jonas, well known in the Roman period. This is a floor mosaic from Aquileia. In the late Roman period, this is a sarcophagus of the 2nd century AD. And this is a painting from the catacomb of Via Latina of 4th century AD. And this is the figure lying under a tree. This is the most important inscription, I think, that before the cleaning was impossible to understand, not only to read, but to understand the meaning. And after the cleaning, we made this cleaning with the help of a French epigraphist that I've just studied the monument. This is the new inscription, and in the inscription is mentioned Walid II. Walid II, not as caliph, but most probably as a crown prince. He was crown prince for 20 years before becoming caliph for a very short time. So it's probably that the monument, the building of the monument, and also the paintings are related to Walid II as crown prince. We know that in this period he built a lot of monuments, like the so-called Isham Palace in Jericho, the Bottom of Jar, that it is also a creation of Walid II. He was a very strange person, but a very good poet, and famous for his style of life, we can see. Also, another change in iconography is the peacock with the inscription. You can see there's synthetic blue of the Spanish theme, and this is the true figure with a very beautiful tail, and this is a particular of the eyes on the tail. This is the central scene before the conservation, with there's a figure lying on the sofa, and other three male interpreted before these two like female figures. And this is after the cleaning, a dramatic change. And you can see this figure completely misunderstood. With it's writing with the stylus something on a scroll, and an ink pot in the hand. And this scene probably is the representation of a private audience of the Umayyad court. Gaetano told that Umayyad, Walid in this case, used the castle also as a center for the ceremony linked to the Bedouin tribes. So it is a private, not a public audience with the Umayyad ceremonial. This is the south wall after the conservation. You can see this shining blue, and this is very interesting because it's a true lapislazuli stone. Lapislazuli crushed and used like pigments. And the lapislazuli provenience is very far from this area, also in more ancient times, because the mines are in Afghanistan, in the Badakhshan region near China. So it was not only a non-usual pigment, but it was very expensive in Italy, in the Byzantine painting. They used very scarcely this pigment because it's too expensive. Gaetano told the meaning of this scene. We can see the change. This is before the intervention. You can see this particular that is an invention of the Spanish theme. And you can see also the particular of the landscape, this plant, pink plant, but plant. And this is the most important, one of the most important scenes, because before the reading of description, all the monument was dated on the basis of this scene by the presence of the second character that who was interpreted as Roderick, the Visigothic king of Spain, debated by the Umayyad in 711. So the first one was the Kaiser, Caesar, the Byzantine emperor. The third was surely the Sasanian emperor, because its crown is very particular, is linked to the Sasanian empire with these wings. The inscription with the name of Kaiser, Caesar, was detached by the Museum Milik and sold to the Pergamon Museum. And we can see Caesar and the top of the head of the second character, but we can read anything. And this is the change of iconography. The Spanish can't see very well the situation because the cleaning of the first intervention made by Musil and Milik, this first intervention was made with very strong products like soda, like soap, turpentine, gasoline, very strong products. So they cleaned in the first phase, but then probably it became blankish, all blankish. So they put a layer of shellac that we find in the sequence to obtain a refraction index more acceptable. Then the Spanish tried to clean again with a very strong mixture, but they stopped themselves because they fortunately discovered that they are damaging the picture. So they repainted over the shellac, on the shellac, what they are able to see. So these like dolls, I don't know what are really truly these two portraits. I think that is a generic portrait, but it is a portrait. And also this is Khosrow with the winged hat, the crown. This is the vault. In this case, the Spanish team covered with a neutral color. They called so this color. This is a yellow, a very strong yellow. And cleaning this part, we discover these geometrical architectural patterns in a perspective view. Completely new, you had the first that see this scene is this on the arch, covered by the yellow, as you can see. That is a generic erotic scene with a male figure and a female figure, naked figure, with long curly hairs that linked probably to the Roman picture, Roman paintings. And this tree, that is, the feature is Umayyad, really Umayyad, because we can find this parallel in the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. So this is the final appearance in bright color with all the new fillings, the stone in the gaps cleaned, and so of the south wall of this little part of the west wall that we hope to finish this year in two campaigns, one in April until June and the other from September to the end of the year.
Two final words on the activities we are conducting also in parallel in the creation of a site management plan for the site. Something that is very necessary given the condition of the site and the fact that the government of Jordan attaches a lot of importance also to better presentation of this monument. We have involved the students and the professors from Hashemite University, one of the main universities in Jordan, with a series of interviews to check with the tourists also their expectations, but also the reactions to the visit to the site in order to improve their visiting experience. We had the Minister of Tourism coming several times to the site to check on the progress. We held a series of stakeholder meetings, and also we have involved previous investigators like Ghazi Bishe, previous director of Antiquities in Jordan, but also one of the persons in Jordan that is most familiar with the monument, who is also helping us with the early sources for this investigation. Moreover, we have trained a number of people from the Department of Antiquities in the use of mortar, from slaking to application of the mortar according to the required technique, and also training a number of archaeologists and conservators in assessing and documenting the condition of the site, and hopefully later also in some simple work to perform inside the monument in the future. So with this, I think we are ready for some questions, and I hope that has been interesting for you to see a process that is not only of conservation, but really of true rediscovery of an ancient monument. Thank you very much.
Before we get to questions, I realized that we jumped into the breach so quickly that I don't think we fully explained how all these international teams came together. And I realized when Giovanna was referencing the Spanish team, we hadn't actually explained that this is a very, very collaborative project, and Gaetano's map showing the various institutions around the world really only hints at how collaborative this has been. So Gaetano was obviously leading the WMF portion of this, and Giovanna is from the Conservation Institute in Rome, but also the French Institute for the Near Orient has a number of scholars who've been deeply involved in this site for many years from a research standpoint. And in fact, Gaetano, when I was with Gaetano in Jordan in January, showed me, this magnificent book of really decades of studying the monument and analyzing drawings over time. And then the Spanish have a very deep connection to this site, which I hope Gaetano can say a few words about. So this, and of course the Jordanians are very engaged because it's not just a World Heritage Site, but it's clearly an important linchpin into understanding these group of monuments that are incorrectly called desert castles, as Gaetano pointed out, but deeply important for understanding the evolution of that part of Jordan. So I thought maybe you could say a little bit about the Spanish team and why they're there.
Sure, absolutely. Actually, they are collaborating with us on a number of initiatives. First of all, the Spanish mission to Jordan is a permanent mission financed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain and the Minister of Culture. And the director of this institution is with us, working, Ignacio Arce, working with us on various aspects. He has been doing actually conservation of another similar site in only 30 kilometers from here, Qasr al-Habat, which was a Roman fort, a Byzantine palace, and then Umayyad. But then besides, only 3 kilometers from that site, there is a bathhouse very similar to Qusayr Amra. Probably was painted as well, but because of unfortunately other problems, it withstood. The paintings are totally disappeared from that bathhouse. But he's been doing documentation of Umayyad site for the past 20 years, so it was natural for us to involve him in the process. Moreover, he had done also some high-resolution photography that he gave to us for free for use in the project. So that was a natural thing. Now he's involved with us in the archaeological surveys in order to identify the different components of the site, given his also experience and knowledge about the Umayyad period. Also interesting is the fact that Berlin, the Pergamon Museum is involved. We're going to be in Berlin in early May. To see the material they have in storage, and so that we can actually probably do some also tests, because this is material that was detached before the Spanish intervention. So we can see the material as it was before the Spanish put their hands on it. So that's very exciting, and for them as well, because it's confirming the importance of these fragments they held for more than 100 years in their museum.
Thank you so much. I believe you have a question.
I did. Thank you. First of all, great presentation. Thank you very much. I wanted to understand what the Spanish did in regards to the shellacking a little bit better. Did they cover all the paintings with shellac?
It's most of them,
Almost all
except
the
one room.
paintings, except one room. The
It's the Apoditerium.
yes, the Apoditerium one that is Gaetano showed you it at the beginning.
Yeah, I think it's this one, or later maybe. Anyway, it's one of the rooms in the back. The prima.
Sì, sì. All'inizio, non so. At the beginning.
Yeah.
The condition of the room that wasn't shellacked compared to the condition of the paintings that was shellacked. I'm just curious about how, what would have happened in the rooms that was shellacked if they hadn't been? How would the paintings have, which was worse, shellacking them or not shellacking them? I guess is the question.
The worst was shellacking them.
Okay.
Because what you did is you created a barrier to the exchange of vapor and water, and this has created also a pressure from the back, because of course the monument was not originally was plastered from the outside as well, but that plaster was lost. So there was a lot of water migration inside the walls, and then this water was trying to get out. That's why a lot of paintings are detached from the wall.
Not only detached, but only falling down, because
here you have an example of non-shellacked painting. They are out of scratches, of course, but this is also probably because of the being dry paint, so a lot of losses there. However, you see that the chromatism is much better. I mean, the colors are much more natural in the non-shellacked one. The shellac also created this crystallization of the surface, and also this turning the entire thing into a yellow, brownish.
But what led to the notion that shellacking would have been good in the first place? I mean,
We don't know.
Did they use that commonly for
Well,
conservation back then?
I think I would give it.
Shellac was used for conservation in the 70s.
Yes.
In the 70s, yes.
until the 70 are not used more. But Spanish tradition of conservation of paintings, it's very scarce, because the Spanish has retablos. Retablo is a painting on wood. So the shellac also now is used like polishing varnish for the furniture, for the wood. So they are used to use it. But for also in
mural
Italy, we
painting.
use it for mural painting, shellac.
Shellac was used until the 60s in
Until
Italy.
the 60s, more or
Yeah.
less. In the 70s,
It was abandoned.
it was abandoned. And then in this case, we have, surely, I think, a fresco technique. Because in these rooms there was water. So water is not compatible with the dry technique. The conservation is better than in the other part of the monument. So we have only some little areas with shellac in this room, very little.
I understand that you've only been able to conserve about 10% or a little more than that of the entire mural painting
Correct.
surface. Do you expect that, is the rest of this well conserved and this richly painted? And do you expect to find lots more of these incredible discoveries ahead?
Yes, yes, we think so, because
We think
most of the
so.
monument is repainted. Most of the main, not this one. What we see here is the original one. I mean, this is the work here is only to improve, the condition of the viewing, to fill some lacuna and to do this very delicate work
We
that
know
Italians are
that
specialized
this
with.
floor is
Yeah.
completely repainted
Yeah.
because we have the old pictures.
Yeah.
But it's the only manner to rediscover this painting, because these paintings are very important, not only because they are Umayyad, so Islamic, so have an iconic culture, as we are used to know them, but also because this is the end of the ancient paintings. And we know that in this area there was a very famous painting school, but we have absolutely nothing of it, because there was also the iconoclastic Byzantine period, so they destroyed completely the paintings. So it's the unique example of the end of the ancient world in this area.
Yeah. It's like a survival of the late antique painting into a very late building. But some of the representation, as Giovanna was mentioning, are truly late Roman or Byzantine art. There is, I don't have everything here, but there are some details, for example, of that looks like mosaic in painting. And also you mentioned the iconoclastic period, which was a very strong movement within the Christian community, when at a certain point one of the Christian movement decided that
But the problem
images were forbidden in
is
churches.
more complex, because we know the mosaics, but what is the rapporto,
Relationship.
the relationship between the mosaics and the paintings? We have the mosaic, but we haven't more the paintings. So we tell that it depends from the mosaics, but maybe that is the contrary. That the mosaic depends from the...
Or derive their inspiration from paintings, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we know that the paintings were much more common than we have. Unfortunately, they have not survived, both because they were in elevation, and in many cases the walls have collapsed, or because the more delicate nature of a painting that survives less than a mosaic. Yeah.
Another question?
I was just going to ask, do you have a sense of why this building out of the complex survived?
This is a very interesting question, and we think that this building, for some reason, had importance also beyond the Umayyad period. At a certain point, these figures must have meant something for the local population. And in interviews that we did also with the local sheikhs and the local people, it still has importance for them. They have legends attached to it. They have stories. They believe it is their monument. And it's, so at a certain point, this monument was adopted by the Bedouins, and I think this is the only explanation. Some of the inscriptions from the 14th and 15th centuries are very important, very interesting. There are 3 or 4 lines, ink inscription, and they start regularly with a formula. We were here in this holy place, in this holy place, which is strange because it's not a holy place at all. Yeah.
Do we have a sense about why it was abandoned so soon after, you said it was completed in 743 and abandoned probably around
In 750, because of the after the Abbasid revolution and the Abbasids moved the capital from Damascus to Baghdad, and this area became basically abandoned. The Badia, the desert area of Jordan, was pretty much used until the end of the Umayyad period, but then scarcely used after that.
We think so, but we have no archaeological proof.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering the same thing. It had such a short period of construction.
Yeah.
So for most of the existence of the building, it's been an abandoned building.
Yeah.
But do you have any idea of how complete the construction was when it was finished? I mean, did they do all that painting in 25 years?
They had probably done the whole painting in less than 25 years. The building was used. We have, there is archaeological evidence, for example, from the bathhouse, that the bathhouse was in use because there is a lot of ashes found in the, under the suspensure. So the building was used as a bathhouse. Certainly not after the abandonment, because after the abandonment we know that many of the water structures fell into disrepair, so you couldn't use the building without water, for example. So it's an interesting case, but it's a building done by one individual for his own personal use. In the moment this individual is dead in 744, he becomes caliph in April 743 and is killed in February 744. This guy is caliph for less than a year. Poor man. And we know that after his death, already the Umayyad were in crisis, and they didn't come back in this region at all. They were in Damascus trying to defend the caliphate, and they were defeated in northern Iraq in the Battle of Arbela in 750.
You mentioned that the site is still holy for the local Bedouins. How does the Jordanian government accommodate the place as sort of a place of worship for the Bedouins and yet the tourists at the same time?
Yeah, worship is maybe not the right word. Let's say they respect this place. They don't pray there. There is basically is a place that they consider important for their culture, but they also understand that there are other priorities. So so the site is protected and is visited, and of course it's Bedouins go there regularly. I've seen that, and actually one of them, Hakim, he has a tent
The
there.
king of the desert.
He put a tent, the king of the desert. he puts a tent there and he provides refreshments and whatever. But he's not official there. He's tolerated by the authorities. But because of this relationship, the Bedouin tribes, the Beni Sakar
Also
tribes.
help for the women.
And so they allow him to stay without a license and so on. So there is some kind of though to this situation there. Yeah.
Well, it probably helps too that it's a little bit off the beaten path, so it's
Just
easy
outside.
to get to,
Yeah.
but it's not quite so front and center as some other sites in the country
Sure.
where they might be a little more concerned about it.
Sure.
Although we were there on a freezing day, so it was excellent that he was there with tea for us. So.
In a hot, in a fireplace in the
Yes,
middle
exactly.
of his tent. Yeah.
Well, I think if there are no more questions, sure, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm just interested in the choice of imagery, and are there precedents? I mean, you could see that in terms of women bathing, and maybe other sporting scenes and things that there may have been precedents in Roman bathhouses, but then there seems to be religious imagery, so it's a kind of a combination. I'm just interested in your comments about.
Yeah, you want to say something? I'll try to say that.
The Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, the variety altogether in this place is quite unique. I mean, the fact that you have prophets and you have an erotic scene side by side is quite extraordinary. However, it's not rare to find this. Individually, these elements are perfectly common, but put them all together in this context is quite extraordinary. And but also we are now discovering that both the technique but also the finesse of the details And the characteristic of the paintings are much higher quality than we ever suspected. We have to rewrite the history, actually not we, because we are not the experts, but there will be scholars that will have to rewrite the history of Umayyad art, of early Islamic art. And this is changing the perspective 100%. So it's quite exciting.
Also because we are not able to understand the meaning of the cycle. Maybe that it is linked to some
Episodes in life?
episodes of life of Walid, maybe. There is a very strange, there is a very strange event, because in one of the novella,
Of the 1001 Night stories.
1001
Yeah.
Night stories, there was Walid as a principal character, and one scribe, like example of generosity, of high animal,
Spirit.
high spirit, and one other character whose name is Jonah. That
Yunus
is
in
a
Arabic. Yeah.
Yunus, that is a scribe. Maybe that we have in this wall the same.
It looks like a strange
Maybe.
coincidence that we have a
Maybe, I don't
scribe
know, because
under the
I have no
representation of Yunus.
sure,
Yes.
proof.
Yeah.
But it's a suggestion. Maybe that is linked. The meaning is linked to the life of Walid himself. So we are not able to understand the wall cycle. Maybe.
Well, I think one other thing is, this really was a very private space because it was a bathhouse. And so it's the building that remains, so in some ways, we're ascribing a very monumental outlook on a space that would have been experienced by very few people, because, the bathhouse would have been very different than the main house at the site or other areas where there would have been more public functions. So, it's interesting what Giovanna says, that this could have been very much about his personal life, because this would have been a very intimate space, and the physical dimensions of the space are small too. So it's, this is very different than a, public reception area. So, maybe we are really seeing very much the inside of his mind in terms of what he wanted to experience.
What is the square foot?
It's aspetta, sono 6 per sono 8 per 6, sono circa 50, quanti sono? Circa 120 quadri in più.
Questo
Sì.
dobbiamo fare.
No, l'edificio. La superficie, perché sono 6, 7, 7. No, I'm thinking, no, I have to also translate from square meter to square feet, I'm sorry. It's about 100 square meters, not much than 100 square meters. So it's very small, it's only about 1,500 square feet. So it's a small place.
That's those of us who live here in Manhattan, who live in 1,500 square feet sounds palatial.
Too large.
Other,
For
one
us.
final question?
Yeah.
This kind of touches on the question I was asked, but also you mentioned that there was this Greco-Roman influence in the way it looked, and all of the inscriptions except for the one are in Greek. Is that something you see elsewhere in Umayyad art, to have Greek inscriptions and to have that influence?
Yeah. Ci sono altri siti Umayyadi con iscrizioni in greco,
Isham Palace has
in Jericho,
in Jericho has a
Greek
Greek
inscription.
inscription, but we haven't more the paintings of the Isham Palace, because the second floor was painted, decorated with paintings.
Yeah.
So I think that it is rather sure that the painters are Byzantine, because in the Umayyad period they continued to use without any problem the workshop, the artist. We can see also in Damascus mosque, that is a church transformed into a mosque with Byzantine artists,
Yeah.
Byzantine and Mossaci.
Yeah, the other World Heritage Site in Jordan, which is Umrasas, one of the other four, is a Byzantine fort that is used not only into the Umayyad, into the Abbasid period. There is one of the churches is built in 790, which is 150 years after the Islamic conquest, and it's typical Byzantine architecture. If one would say it's from the 5th century, no, it's from the late 8th century. So
It's too early to identify also if surely there were different workshops working on the paintings. We start to see some difference in the use of some pigments, in the use of some features, iconography features, and it's too early.
but that would explain
Really,
the question. That would also satisfy your question. How it's possible that it was built in such a short time? If there were different workshops working in different parts of the monument,
Surely
then
different
that would
workshops.
explain. Yeah.
Because also in these two walls that are very next, where the manner to realize the face is not the same. This is clear, but in this moment I'm not able to say more, but it's clear that there are different workshops. But in the ancient paintings, also in the same scene, we can have different painters, also Roman paintings, because someone of them was able to realize the figure, other to realize some portrait, some particular, like in the mosaic, the emblemata are made by different mosaicists than the other carpet of mosaic. So we can, we hope to find more proof of different workshop, different painters also.
Well, I think that's the perfect note for ending, because it suggests you'll have to come back and tell us more.
Or you have to visit in Jordan.
So I want to thank you both very much, and I want to invite everybody to join us for a drink, and you can ask more questions of Giovanna and Gaetano, who I'm sure will be happy to answer them.
Thank you.